Welcome to Darkwake Signal. In 1987, installation Cordova-Nine was officially decommissioned beneath the polar Atlantic. All systems stripped, all power disconnected, site declared inert. 38 years later, a routine dive was sent to confirm what the records already said. What they found down there contradicted every single page of official documentation. If you're watching this unfold, hit subscribe, leave a like, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Signal received. Let's dive in. Installation Cordova-Nine appeared in the archives as decommissioned. Official records dated its shutdown to 1987. All systems listed as stripped. All power infrastructure noted as removed. Site classification: environmentally inert. The operation was scheduled during the winter environmental survey window. Ice conditions were documented as stable. Weather projections indicated a 4-day operational margin. Equipment manifests were verified and cross-checked against polar deployment protocols. The mission brief described the objective as routine verification, visual confirmation of structural integrity, assessment of any potential environmental degradation, standard documentation for historical closure records. Commander Alaric Fenway Roche reviewed the operational plan 3 times before approval. The documentation was comprehensive. The risk assessment showed nothing beyond typical cold water diving parameters. Chief diver Lucien Marot Belcourt had operated in polar conditions for 11 years. His dive log included 17 subsea structure inspections beneath ice. He reviewed the site coordinates without comment. Safety diver Eamon Thorne Kessler was assigned as visual escort and emergency backup. His role required observation and documentation. He checked camera systems twice. The briefing lasted 14 minutes. No questions were raised. The dive platform was positioned above the recorded coordinates at 0620 hours. Surface conditions were within acceptable limits. Wind speed measured at 8 knots. Air temperature registered at -12°C. Ice thickness at the penetration point measured 2.4 meters. Thermal lances created the access hole in 42 minutes. Water temperature beneath the ice was measured at -1.7°C. Salinity levels were consistent with polar Atlantic conditions. Visibility was logged as adequate for the planned depth. Pre-dive systems checks returned no faults. Belcourt entered the water at 0731 hours. Kessler followed at 0733 hours. Descent began immediately. Communications remained clear throughout initial descent. Belcourt reported depth increments at standard intervals. Biometric telemetry showed normal ranges across all indicators. At 40 meters, visibility decreased as expected. Belcourt switched to forward-mounted illumination. The water column showed no unusual particulate content. At 60 meters, sonar contact was established with the seafloor structure. The descent continued. Roche monitored from the surface platform. Radio traffic was minimal. All telemetry remained within predicted parameters. Heart rate, respiration, oxygen consumption, all nominal. At 78 meters, Belcourt reported visual contact with the installation. His description was procedural. Concrete foundation visible. Structural supports intact. No obvious degradation. External plating showed corrosion consistent with prolonged submersion. Kessler confirmed visual contact 6 seconds later. Roche logged the time as 0749 hours. Belcourt approached the primary structure. His helmet camera transmitted clear footage. The installation was larger than the archival diagrams suggested. 3 distinct sections were visible. Cylindrical modules connected by reinforced corridors. External hatches sealed. The structure appeared stable. Belcourt moved along the eastern exterior wall. His task was to document any structural breaches or environmental contamination points. He proceeded methodically. The camera footage showed rust patterns, marine growth accumulation and minor surface pitting. Nothing unusual. At 0753 hours, Kessler reported an observation. His voice remained level. He stated that the water temperature near the structure was higher than ambient readings. Not significantly. Not enough to trigger any alerts. But measurable. Roche requested confirmation. Kessler repeated the reading. The temperature differential was 0.9 degrees Celsius higher within 3 meters of the structure. Belcourt checked his own instrumentation. He confirmed the reading. Roche made a note in the operational log. Thermal retention from residual internal materials was listed as a possible explanation. Concrete and metal structures sometimes retain temperature differentials for extended periods. The dive continued. Belcourt reached the northern section at 0758 hours. He directed his helmet light toward an observation port. The glass was intact, heavily obscured by marine growth. He moved closer. The light illuminated the interior. There was a pause in radio traffic. Belcourt's breathing pattern remained steady. He reported interior visibility through the port. Roche asked for description. Belcourt stated that the interior space was not flooded. The observation port showed a dry corridor. Walls were visible. Structural elements were intact. This was consistent with decommissioning records. Many subsea installations were sealed and left with internal atmospheric pressure to prevent implosion during abandonment. Kessler moved to a second observation port 12 meters west. He confirmed similar findings. Dry interior. No flooding. Structural integrity maintained. At 0804 hours, Belcourt reached the primary access hatch. The hatch was sealed. Heavy locking mechanisms were visible. Corrosion was present but not structurally compromising. He inspected the seal integrity. No breaches were detected. He moved his light across the hatch frame. There was a status indicator panel adjacent to the locking mechanism. Belcourt paused. He keyed his radio. He stated that the panel was illuminated. Roche asked for repetition. Belcourt repeated. The status panel was showing active indicators. Small lights. Green. Steady. Kessler moved to Belcourt's position. He confirmed visual contact with the panel. His helmet camera captured clear footage. 3 indicator lights. All green. All illuminated. Roche reviewed the transmission in real time. The footage was clear. The lights were unmistakably active. He consulted the decommissioning documentation. The file stated that all electrical systems had been powered down in 1987. All internal systems were listed as non-functional. Belcourt reported additional findings. He had moved along the western module. There were 3 additional status panels. All showed active illumination, different configurations, some red indicators, some amber, all clearly functional. At 0809 hours, Kessler reported thermal readings near the access hatch. Temperature differential had increased, now 1.6 degrees Celsius above ambient. Belcourt positioned himself near a ventilation grating. He directed his light into the interior. Air movement was visible. Slight distortion in the water near the grating indicated thermal output. The structure was venting heat. Roche updated the operational log. He noted the discrepancy between documented decommissioning status and observed conditions. He instructed both divers to maintain position and continue documentation. Belcourt conducted a full perimeter inspection. He documented 14 separate status panels. 12 showed active illumination. The remaining 2 were obscured by marine growth but appeared intact. Kessler measured thermal output at 6 separate points. All readings showed elevated temperature within proximity to the structure. The highest differential was recorded near the southern module at 2.3 degrees Celsius above ambient. At 0821 hours, Belcourt approached the main ventilation assembly. The grating was sealed but not corroded. He placed his gloved hand near the surface. Heat transfer was detectable even through insulation. He reported stable thermal output, consistent, not fluctuating. Roche asked about visible power sources. Belcourt scanned the immediate area. No external cables. No surface connections. No visible infrastructure. The structure appeared isolated, yet it was clearly maintaining internal systems. Kessler moved to the eastern module. He identified what appeared to be an external sensor array. The equipment was intact. Lenses were clear. Indicator lights were active. He reported that the array appeared to be operational. At 0828 hours, both divers completed external documentation. Belcourt provided summary findings. Structure intact. No breaches. No environmental contamination detected. Internal systems active. Power source unknown. Roche reviewed the data. The decommissioning records were unambiguous. The installation had been stripped. All functional systems had been removed. The site had been abandoned as an inert structure. The observations contradicted every documented detail. At 0831 hours, Belcourt approached the primary access hatch for final documentation. As he moved within 2 meters, the hatch status panel changed. The green indicators switched to amber. Belcourt stopped. He reported the change immediately. Kessler confirmed visual contact. The panel had responded to proximity. The lights had changed configuration. Belcourt remained stationary. The amber indicators held steady for 11 seconds. Then a red indicator illuminated. No sound was transmitted through the water. No mechanical noise. No vibration. The red light simply activated. Belcourt stepped back. The panel cycled. Amber returned. Then green. The sequence completed in 4 seconds. Kessler asked if approach should continue. Roche reviewed the footage. The panel had clearly responded to proximity. The system was not merely powered. It was monitoring. It was reacting. He issued an ascent order. Both divers acknowledged. The ascent began at 0834 hours. Belcourt maintained visual contact with the structure during initial ascent. The status panels remained illuminated. The thermal output continued. The structure showed no further changes. At 40 meters, visibility improved. Both divers confirmed no complications. Biometric telemetry remained normal. They surfaced at 0901 hours. Decompression protocols were standard. No medical concerns were noted. Roche conducted immediate debriefing while equipment was secured. The footage was reviewed 3 times. The thermal data was consistent. The visual documentation was clear. The installation was operational. There was no listed power source. No surface connection. No external infrastructure. Yet internal systems were clearly active. Environmental controls were functioning. Status panels were responding to external presence. The structure had been abandoned 38 years prior. It should not have been functional. At 1130 hours, Roche prepared the preliminary mission report. He documented observed conditions. He noted contradictions with archived records. He classified findings as requiring further analysis. He did not speculate regarding cause. The formatting followed standard incident documentation protocols. Each observation was listed with corresponding timestamp. Each measurement was recorded with instrumentation reference codes. The language remained neutral throughout. He included reference to the decommissioning file. The discrepancies were noted without interpretation. The active status panels were described as factual observations. The thermal output was presented as measured data. No conclusions were drawn. The report was transmitted via encrypted channel at 1147 hours. Acknowledgement was received at 1149 hours with no additional instructions, no requests for clarification, no indication of concern. Standard operational acknowledgement only. Roche logged the transmission confirmation and returned to equipment inventory procedures. At 1,340 hours, weather conditions began to shift. Wind speed increased to 14 knots. Barometric pressure showed gradual decline. The operational window was narrowing as predicted. The platform prepared for departure protocols. At 1,620 hours, Roche received updated operational instructions via the same encrypted channel used for the preliminary report transmission. The mission was reclassified. Additional dive operations were suspended pending administrative review. All documentation was flagged for technical assessment. The site was to be marked for future evaluation. No immediate action was required. Roche read the message twice. The language was standard. The classification change was not unusual for sites showing unexpected conditions. Technical assessment reviews were routine procedure when field observations contradicted archived documentation. Nothing in the message indicated urgency. Nothing suggested concern. At 1,655 hours, final equipment securing was completed. The platform was cleared from the site at 1804 hours. Weather conditions remained stable during departure. Ice conditions were unchanged. The access hole had already begun to refreeze. Within 12 hours it would be indistinguishable from surrounding ice. Roche filed the final operational log at 2043 hours with all recorded data, unedited footage, biometric telemetry, environmental measurements, equipment performance notes, weather conditions, and ice parameters. He made no conclusions. The log was marked as complete. During the return voyage, each member of the team worked independently. Belcourt reviewed his helmet camera footage privately. The illuminated panels were clearly visible in every frame. The thermal distortion near the ventilation grating was documented from multiple angles. The proximity response of the status panel was captured in high resolution. He made notes in his personal dive log with factual entries only: depth measurements, duration records, equipment performance. No interpretations were included. Kessler spent 3 hours organizing his photographic documentation, sorting images by timestamp, cataloging thermal readings, preparing a complete visual record of the external structure. He did not discuss findings with other personnel. Roche spent the voyage preparing supplementary documentation, cross-referencing the decommissioning records with observed conditions, compiling lists of discrepancies, organizing data into standardized reporting formats. He did not speculate in any written material. The platform returned to port on schedule. Equipment was offloaded and transferred to maintenance facilities. All personnel underwent standard post-mission medical evaluation. No abnormalities were noted. Debriefing was scheduled for the following day. Within 1 week of return, the quiet administrative machinery began its work. Belcourt received reassignment orders through standard personnel channels. Transfer to routine coastal survey operations effective immediately. The assignment was not unusual. Personnel rotations occurred regularly. Coastal survey work was considered standard duty. No explanation was provided. Belcourt acknowledged the orders and began transfer procedures. 2 days later, Kessler was transferred to Training Command. The orders arrived with similar format. Standard personnel reassignment. No explanation provided. Training Command assignments were common for experienced personnel. Kessler completed transfer documentation without comment. Roche remained in operational oversight capacity. He received no further communication regarding installation Cordova-Nine. No requests for additional information. No follow-up assessment schedules. The mission file was marked as complete in operational archives. 2 weeks after the dive, Roche conducted routine review of active mission records. Installation Cordova-Nine appeared in the database with standard classification markers. The coordinates remained in active records. Environmental monitoring status was listed as pending. No subsequent missions were scheduled. No timeline was indicated for future assessment. The site designation remained active but unassigned. Roche noted the status in his personal records. He made no formal inquiries. The platform returned to port on schedule. Equipment was offloaded and transferred to maintenance facilities. All dive gear was inventoried and secured. Camera systems were verified as containing complete footage. Environmental sensors were confirmed as having recorded full data sets. All personnel underwent standard post-mission medical evaluation with no abnormalities noted. Debriefing was scheduled for the following day. The session was conducted in a standard briefing room. Roche, Belcourt, and Kessler were present. 2 additional personnel from operational oversight attended for documentation and procedural review. The debriefing followed standard format. Roche presented the mission timeline, referencing his operational logs, providing weather data, ice conditions, and equipment performance metrics. He documented the descent profile and surface communication records. All parameters had remained within acceptable ranges throughout the operation. Belcourt described the external inspection of the structure, detailing the condition of the concrete foundation, structural supports, and external plating. He noted corrosion patterns consistent with prolonged submersion and reported no structural breaches or environmental contamination indicators. The structure had appeared stable and intact. Then he described the status panels. He stated the facts as observed. Multiple panels showing active illumination across 3 structural modules. Green indicators, red indicators, amber indicators, all clearly functional. He documented 14 separate panels. 12 showed active illumination. 2 were obscured by marine growth but appeared intact. Kessler confirmed the observations. He had photographed 8 of the panels from different angles. The documentation was comprehensive. The illumination was unmistakable in every image. Belcourt continued with thermal measurements, reporting elevated water temperature within proximity to the structure. The differential ranged from 0.9 to 2.3 degrees Celsius above ambient depending on location. The highest readings were near ventilation assemblies. Heat transfer was detectable even through insulated diving gloves. Kessler provided corroborating measurements from 6 separate points around the structure. The data was consistent across both sets of instrumentation. Roche then described the proximity response event. He displayed the helmet camera footage. The playback showed Belcourt approaching the primary access hatch. The status panel showed steady green indicators. As Belcourt moved within 2 meters, the indicators switched to amber. After 11 seconds, a red indicator illuminated. When Belcourt stepped back, the panel cycled through amber and returned to green. The sequence was clear in the footage. The panel had responded to presence. One of the oversight personnel asked about possible equipment malfunction. Belcourt stated that both divers had witnessed the response. Both helmet cameras had recorded it. The event had occurred in clear view with adequate lighting. The response timing was consistent with proximity-based triggering. The oversight personnel made notes but offered no comment. Roche presented the decommissioning documentation for comparison. The file stated clearly that all electrical systems had been powered down in 1987. All internal systems were listed as non-functional. All power infrastructure was documented as removed. The installation had been classified as environmentally inert. The observations contradicted every documented detail. The debriefing concluded after 2 hours and 16 minutes with no conclusions requested and no speculation encouraged. The session was marked as complete. All personnel returned to standard duties. Roche spent the following 3 days preparing the comprehensive mission report. The document followed standard operational format with each observation listed with corresponding timestamp and measurement data. The thermal readings were presented in tabular format. The visual documentation was referenced with specific frame numbers and metadata. He included complete transcripts of all radio communications during the dive and attached biometric telemetry showing that both divers had remained physiologically stable throughout the operation. He documented the decision to abort approach based on unexpected system response. The formatting was precise. The language remained neutral throughout. No interpretations were included. No speculation appeared anywhere in the document. The report concluded with a statement of factual summary: structure intact, internal systems operational, power source undetermined, site classification requiring reassessment. No recommendations were made. Roche submitted the report through standard channels on the fourth day after return. Acknowledgement of receipt was logged within 2 hours. No additional instructions were provided. Belcour and Kessler prepared their individual dive logs according to standard procedure. Each diver maintained personal documentation separate from official mission reports, detailed records of observations, measurements, and equipment performance. Belcour's log documented the complete external inspection route, noting the condition of each structural section, recording the location of every status panel encountered, listing thermal measurements with corresponding positions around the structure, describing the proximity response in factual terms matching his debriefing statements. Kessler's log focused on visual documentation and secondary measurements, cataloging every photograph taken during the dive, noting camera settings and lighting conditions, recording his thermal sensor readings with timestamps, confirming Belcour's observations regarding the panel response. Both logs were filed in personal records. Neither diver discussed the mission with personnel outside the official debriefing. Over the following weeks, a pattern of verification emerged. 1 week after return, the helmet camera footage was reviewed by technical analysis personnel in a secure facility. Roche was not present. No divers were requested to attend. The analysis focused on the status panel sequences with frame-by-frame examination confirming the illumination patterns. The proximity response timing was measured precisely. The footage quality was verified as authentic with no evidence of tampering or post-processing. The technical analysis report was filed separately from the mission documentation. Roche received no copy. No results were communicated to him. 2 weeks after the mission, Belcour's dive equipment underwent routine post-operation maintenance inspection. The thermal sensors were removed and sent for calibration verification. Laboratory testing confirmed that all instruments had functioned within acceptable tolerance ranges with no drift detected and no malfunction indicators present. The sensors had accurately recorded the temperature differentials at Cordova-Nine. The calibration report was filed with equipment maintenance records. 3 weeks after the dive, Kessler's camera systems underwent similar verification. The helmet-mounted cameras were tested for metadata integrity, timestamp logging examined for consistency, image sensors checked for any anomalies that might produce false illumination patterns. All systems tested within normal parameters. The footage was confirmed as genuine documentation of observed conditions. The verification report was archived with mission support documentation. 4 weeks after return, Roche noticed that the Cordova-Nine file had been flagged in the operational database, indicating administrative review with no timeline specified and no reviewing authority identified. Access to the file remained unrestricted. All documentation was still available through standard channels. But the flag indicated that the mission was not yet considered closed. Roche made note of the status but submitted no inquiry. 5 weeks after the mission, the decommissioning records for Cordova-Nine were retrieved from deep archives by personnel unknown to Roche. The retrieval was logged in the archive access system. The records were copied but not removed. No explanation was recorded for why the historical documentation was being reviewed. The decommissioning file remained in its original location. The copies were transmitted through encrypted channels to an unspecified destination. The archive system logged the transaction and returned to normal operation. Over the next month, requests and inquiries arrived in measured sequence. 6 weeks after the dive, Roche received a request for specific footage segments from a departmental code he did not recognize. Helmet camera views of the illuminated status panels with particular timestamps specified, thermal imaging data from the ventilation assemblies requested. He compiled the materials, extracted the relevant footage, attached the corresponding thermal data files, verified that all metadata was included, transmitted the package via the channel specified in the request. No acknowledgement was received. He logged the transmission and continued with current operational responsibilities. 7 weeks after the mission, Belcour received an administrative inquiry requesting clarification regarding his thermal sensor readings, asking specific questions about calibration timing, requesting confirmation of measurement procedures, asking whether he had observed any equipment anomalies during the dive. He prepared a detailed response confirming that all calibration protocols had been followed, providing equipment serial numbers and maintenance records, stating that no anomalies had been observed and that all instruments had performed normally throughout the operation. He transmitted his response through the specified channel. No follow-up questions arrived. 8 weeks after the dive, Kessler received a similar inquiry focusing on the helmet camera footage, asking whether any post-processing had been applied to the images, requesting confirmation that the footage represented unedited documentation of observed conditions, asking about lighting conditions and camera settings during the recording of the proximity response sequence. He confirmed that all footage was captured in native format with no editing, no filters applied, cameras recording continuously without interruption, all metadata tags authentic and verifiable. He attached technical specifications for the camera systems and lighting equipment used during the dive. The inquiry was marked as resolved in the administrative tracking system. No further communication followed. 9 weeks after the mission, a secondary review of the mission documentation was conducted by personnel from a different department than the original technical analysis. Roche was not notified of the review. No results were communicated to him. The secondary review examined the consistency between Roche's operational logs, the divers' reports, and the recorded footage. Every timestamp cross-referenced, every measurement verified against multiple sources, every observation checked for corroboration between different documentation streams. The review found no discrepancies. All records were internally consistent. All observations were supported by multiple forms of evidence. The review report was filed separately from other mission documentation, containing no recommendations, drawing no conclusions, simply confirming that the documentation was consistent and complete. 10 weeks after the dive, the site classification was formally amended in the central database. The change appeared without announcement. No notification was sent to Roche or the dive team. The previous classification of environmentally inert was removed. The new designation read Environmental Anomaly Under Assessment, dated 2 weeks after the mission but processed and published only now. No explanation accompanied the classification change. No assessment timeline was specified. No responsible agency was identified. The file remained flagged for administrative review. 11 weeks after the mission, parallel observations began appearing in unrelated channels. A research vessel conducting oceanographic work passed near the Cordova-Nine area, its mission involving deep water current pattern studies. The crew had no knowledge of any subsea installations in the region. During routine sonar scanning, the vessel detected a large artificial structure at the depth corresponding to Cordova-Nine. The sonar operator noted the contact and logged the coordinates. The structure appeared intact and substantial. No other details could be determined from the sonar return. The finding was recorded in the vessel's daily operational log, transmitted to research coordinators as part of routine data sharing. The coordinates entered into bathymetric databases as a point of interest. No connection was made to any classified installation. The crew assumed it was a documented wreck or known structure. The vessel continued its planned research route without deviation. 12 weeks after the dive, geological researchers analyzing Arctic ice samples noted an anomaly. The samples had been collected from various locations for climate research purposes. Analysis of cores taken within 5 kilometers of Cordova-Nine showed unusual patterns in the lower ice layers. Ice structure indicating long-term thermal influence from below, heating patterns subtle but measurable, suggesting a consistent heat source had been present beneath the ice for an extended period. The researchers documented the finding in their geological survey report, attributing the anomaly to possible volcanic activity or geothermal venting. Such phenomena were known to occur in the region. The explanation seemed reasonable. No connection was made to artificial structures. The research team had no access to naval installation databases. Their report was published in a geological research journal, appearing alongside dozens of other technical papers, attracting no particular attention from the wider scientific community. 13 weeks after the mission, Roche was conducting routine review of operational files when he accessed the Cordova-Nine documentation. The file showed all materials he had submitted: footage intact, thermal data complete, logs comprehensive, nothing removed or redacted. But no analysis had been added. No assessment conclusions appeared anywhere in the file. No follow-up investigation had been documented. The mission existed as a complete record without interpretation. The site remained classified as an environmental anomaly under assessment. The flag for administrative review remained active. But no activity had been recorded for 3 weeks. Roche closed the file and returned to current operations. 14 weeks after the dive, training protocols for Arctic subsea operations were updated. The revision appeared in the standard training documentation system, implemented without announcement or explanation. A new section addressed procedures for encountering unexpected operational status at decommissioned sites, specifying enhanced documentation requirements, outlining protocols for measuring thermal anomalies, detailing procedures for identifying active monitoring systems without direct contact. The section provided specific guidance on proximity assessment, recommending maintaining distance from any systems showing responsive behavior, emphasizing the importance of complete visual and thermal documentation before withdrawal. The training update referenced no specific incident. No example scenarios were provided. The guidance was presented as general best practice for Arctic operations. Kessler came across the updated protocols during routine training review. He recognized elements that seemed familiar. The documentation requirements matched procedures he and Belcourt had followed during the Cordova-Nine mission. The proximity assessment guidance reflected the decision-making that had led to aborting the dive. He noted the update but made no formal observation. The new protocols became standard procedure for all Arctic diving operations. 16 weeks after the mission, Roche prepared his quarterly operational summary covering all missions conducted during the period. Cordova-Nine was listed among them with a brief factual entry: survey mission conducted at installation Cordova-Nine. Structure found intact. Unexpected operational status observed. Full documentation submitted. Site classification updated to environmental anomaly. Assessment pending. No additional detail was included in the quarterly summary. The mission was presented as one-line item among many operations. The summary was reviewed and approved through standard channels. No questions were raised regarding the Cordova-Nine entry. 17 weeks after the dive, automated satellite monitoring began detecting thermal signatures in the polar Atlantic as part of routine environmental observation. The system scanned for temperature anomalies across Arctic waters. A subtle thermal signature was detected at coordinates matching the Cordova-Nine site, indicating elevated water temperature in a localized area, the pattern suggesting a point source beneath the ice. The automated system classified the finding as consistent with natural geothermal activity. Such signatures were common in polar regions. The reading fell within parameters that did not trigger manual review alerts. The data was archived along with thousands of other environmental measurements collected that week. No human analyst examined the specific reading. No connection was made to the installation survey conducted 4 months prior. The thermal signature continued to appear in subsequent monitoring passes, remaining stable and consistent. The automated system continued logging the data without generating alerts. 18 weeks after the mission, a final administrative action was taken regarding the Cordova-Nine file. The flag for active review was changed to archived status. The file was transferred to long-term storage designation. Access remained unrestricted through standard channels, but the file was no longer classified as requiring ongoing assessment. No notification was sent to Roche or the dive team. No final report was issued. No conclusions were documented. The site classification remained as environmental anomaly with no timeline established for future evaluation. No restrictions placed on the area, no warning markers attached to the coordinates. The file simply existed as a complete documented record with no resolution. Installation Cordova-Nine remained beneath the polar Atlantic ice. The status panels remained illuminated. The thermal output continued. The internal systems maintained operation. No power source had been identified. No maintenance had been conducted. No explanation had been provided. The structure operated without intervention. The observations had been documented. The contradictions had been recorded. The facts had been verified and archived. No action had been taken. No investigation had been scheduled. No conclusion had been reached. The mission was complete. The site remained operational. 6 months after the mission, the quiet redistribution was complete. Belcour had been reassigned to coastal survey operations. The orders arrived through standard personnel channels with no explanation provided. The assignment was routine. Coastal survey work was considered standard duty rotation. Personnel transfers occurred regularly across operational commands. He acknowledged the orders and began transfer procedures. His personal dive logs were archived according to protocol. His equipment was inventoried and transferred to the new assignment location. His clearances were updated to reflect the change in operational theater. The transfer was completed within 2 weeks. He did not return to Arctic operations. 7 months after the dive, Kessler received transfer orders to Training Command. The document specified his new role as an instructor for cold water diving procedures. The position was considered a standard career progression for experienced personnel. Training Command assignments were common for divers with extensive operational backgrounds. He completed the transfer documentation, his records forwarded to the training facility, his operational clearances adjusted accordingly. He reported to his new assignment on schedule. His work no longer involved field operations. 8 months after the mission, Roche remained in his operational oversight position. He received no communication regarding installation Cordova-Nine. No requests for additional information arrived. No follow-up assessments were scheduled. No inquiries were made about the mission. His responsibilities continued to include oversight of Arctic operations, but no missions were assigned to the Cordova-Nine coordinates. The site appeared in operational databases with its updated classification but no active tasking. He conducted his duties according to standard procedures, supervising multiple missions across various locations. Cordova-Nine was not among them. 9 months after the dive, a civilian oceanographic research proposal was submitted for Arctic waters study. The research plan covered a broad geographic area including ice thickness monitoring, water temperature measurement, and ecosystem assessment. The proposed study zone encompassed hundreds of square kilometers of polar Atlantic waters. The proposal was reviewed through standard environmental coordination channels with multiple agencies examining the research plan, permits evaluated, safety protocols assessed, environmental impact considered. Approval was granted with specific modifications. A restricted zone designated around particular coordinates with a restriction radius of 5 kilometers, the documentation citing ongoing environmental assessment as justification with no additional details provided. The coordinates corresponded to installation Cordova-Nine. The research institution accepted the modification without inquiry. The exclusion represented less than 2% of their total study area. Alternative sampling locations were selected. The project proceeded on schedule. No explanation was requested regarding the restricted zone. 10 months after the mission, automated environmental monitoring detected continuing thermal signatures at the Cordova-Nine location through satellites equipped with thermal imaging systems as part of routine polar observation programs. The thermal signature remained consistent with previous measurements. Elevated water temperature detected in a localized pattern, the heat source stable, no fluctuations recorded beyond normal environmental variation. The automated analysis systems continued to classify the signature as geothermal activity. The readings remained within parameters that did not trigger manual review. No alerts were generated. The data was archived in environmental monitoring databases along with measurements from thousands of other locations. No human analyst examined the specific readings. No correlation was made with naval installation records. 11 months after the dive, geological survey teams collected additional ice core samples from the polar Atlantic region as part of ongoing climate research. Multiple teams were operating across Arctic waters gathering data for long-term temperature trend analysis. Samples collected within 8 kilometers of Cordova-Nine continued to show anomalous ice structure patterns, lower layers indicating thermal influence from below, the effect measurable across multiple sampling points, the pattern suggesting a persistent heat source had been present for years. Researchers documented the findings in their survey reports, attributing the thermal influence to volcanic or geothermal activity. The explanation was consistent with known phenomena in polar regions. No alternative causes were considered. The data was published in climate research journals, the findings appearing in technical papers discussing Arctic ice formation, the anomaly noted but not emphasized, representing one data point among thousands in comprehensive climate studies. No connection was made to artificial structures. 1 year after the mission, Roche was reviewing operational databases during routine administrative work. He accessed the Cordova-Nine file to verify its archive status. The file remained in long-term storage with all documentation intact. Footage, thermal data, and operational logs preserved without modification. Nothing had been added since the file was archived 4 months earlier. The site classification remained unchanged. Environmental anomaly under assessment. No assessment timeline was specified. No responsible agency was identified. No restrictions were listed beyond the 5-kilometer research exclusion zone. He noted that no missions had been scheduled to the site in 12 months. No proposals had been submitted. No requests had been filed. The coordinates simply existed in the database with no active tasking. He closed the file and continued with current responsibilities. 14 months after the dive, deep ocean monitoring sensors were deployed across Arctic regions as part of a multinational climate research initiative. The sensor network included hundreds of instruments measuring water temperature, salinity, current patterns, and acoustic signatures. The deployment covered vast areas of polar and subpolar waters. 2 sensors were positioned within 12 kilometers of Cordova-Nine, the placement determined by oceanographic modeling that identified optimal locations for current pattern measurement, the coordinates selected without reference to any subsea installations. The sensors began transmitting data immediately upon deployment. Temperature readings from both units showed consistent anomalies, localized areas of elevated water temperature detected, the thermal signatures indicating point sources rather than regional phenomena, the pattern stable and continuous. The data flowed into automated analysis systems with anomalies categorized as hydrothermal activity based on comparison with known geothermal signatures in other polar regions. No manual review was triggered. The readings fell within parameters considered normal for deep ocean thermal variation. The sensors continued their monitoring according to program schedules with anomalies persisting in every data transmission, measurements remaining consistent across weeks and months. No alerts were generated. No investigations were initiated. 16 months after the mission, scattered echoes of the dive surfaced in routine contexts. Belcorp was conducting training for new coastal survey personnel covering standard inspection procedures, equipment protocols, and documentation requirements. The trainees were learning basic subsea structure assessment techniques. During discussion of documentation procedures, one trainee asked about encountering unexpected conditions during surveys. The question was general. The trainee wanted to understand proper protocol when field observations contradicted archived records. Belcorp explained standard procedures. Document everything observed, maintain factual descriptions, avoid speculation, follow safety protocols, report contradictions through proper channels. The guidance was straightforward and aligned with established operational doctrine. The trainee asked if such situations occurred frequently. Belcorp stated that most surveys confirmed expected conditions. Occasionally, structures showed better or worse preservation than predicted. Environmental factors varied significantly by location. Proper documentation ensured accurate assessment regardless of findings. He did not reference specific missions. He did not mention Arctic operations. He provided general guidance applicable to all survey work. The training session continued with other topics. 18 months after the dive, Kessler was reviewing training curriculum materials in his instructor role. The curriculum included updated sections on Arctic operations that had been implemented several months earlier, covering procedures for documenting sites showing unexpected operational status. He recognized that the procedures closely matched actions taken during the Cordova-Nine mission, documentation requirements nearly identical to what he and Belcorp had performed, the proximity assessment guidance reflecting the decision-making that had led to aborting the dive approach. The curriculum presented the procedures as standard protocol with no specific incidents referenced, no example missions cited, the guidance framed as general best practice developed through operational experience. Kessler used the curriculum as written in his training sessions, teaching the procedures to new personnel preparing for Arctic assignments, emphasizing the importance of thorough documentation and appropriate caution when encountering unexpected active systems. He made no additional commentary beyond the established curriculum. 20 months after the mission, geological research teams analyzing seismic data from Arctic regions noted unusual acoustic patterns. The team was studying tectonic activity and subsurface geological structures through processing data from seismic monitoring stations distributed across polar areas. Low-frequency acoustic signatures were detected originating from specific coordinates in the polar Atlantic. The signals did not match seismic event patterns. They suggested mechanical activity rather than geological movement. The frequencies were consistent with machinery operation or automated systems cycling. The signals were faint but measurable, appearing periodically in the monitoring data, the pattern suggesting regular operation rather than random occurrence. The research team documented the acoustic signatures in their technical reports, classifying the findings as potentially indicating subsurface water movement or unusual tectonic processes. The signals noted as anomalous but not urgent, with no immediate investigation recommended. The coordinates of the acoustic source corresponded to installation Cordova-Nine. The research team had no access to naval installation databases. No connection was made to artificial structures. The findings were published in geophysical journals as observations requiring further study if resources became available. The acoustic signatures continued to appear in subsequent monitoring data, with the pattern remaining consistent. No follow-up investigation was scheduled. 22 months after the dive, Roche was preparing materials for a professional development presentation on operational decision-making to be delivered to mid-level commanders, focusing on judgment under uncertain conditions. He reviewed case studies from his career that illustrated different aspects of command responsibility and considered including the Cordova-Nine mission as an example of appropriate response to unexpected field observations. The case provided clear demonstration of proper protocol. Documentation had been thorough, the decision to abort the dive had been correct given the circumstances, the reporting had been factual and complete. After consideration, he chose not to include the mission in his presentation. The case remained unresolved. The observations had never been explained. Including it might raise questions he could not answer. Other case studies with clear outcomes would serve the training purpose more effectively. He selected alternative examples and prepared the presentation accordingly. The session was delivered as scheduled and received positive evaluation. 2 years after the mission, satellite thermal imaging continued detecting the stable heat signature at Cordova-Nine coordinates. The monitoring had been consistent for 24 months. Every scan showed the same localized thermal elevation. The pattern never varied beyond normal environmental fluctuation. The automated systems continued processing the data without generating alerts. The classification remained as geothermal activity. No manual review had been triggered at any point during 2 years of continuous monitoring. The thermal signature existed as a permanent feature in environmental monitoring databases, one data point among millions collected from polar regions, appearing in archived datasets available to researchers studying Arctic conditions. No analyst had examined it specifically. No investigation had been conducted. No connection had been made to any artificial structure. 26 months after the dive, a comprehensive review of decommissioned Cold War installations was initiated across multiple agencies, prompted by environmental concerns regarding aging structures, the goal being to identify sites requiring remediation or enhanced monitoring. Installation Cordova-Nine appeared in the database of sites subject to review with the entry including basic information about location, decommissioning date, and structural type, the site flagged for assessment based on age and Arctic environmental factors. Review personnel retrieved the archived mission file from 2 years prior and examined all documentation. The decommissioning records from 1987 were compared with field observations from the survey dive. The contradictions were noted: illuminated status panels documented in the review notes, thermal output recorded, proximity response described. The review team found no subsequent investigation had been conducted. No explanation had been provided for the active systems. No follow-up assessment had been scheduled. The site simply existed in archives with observations that contradicted official decommissioning records. A recommendation was drafted to conduct a new inspection mission outlining objectives including verification of current status, investigation of power source, and assessment of environmental impact with timeline and resource requirements estimated. The recommendation was submitted through administrative channels for approval and scheduling. 3 months later, the recommendation was returned marked as deferred, the documentation citing resource allocation constraints and competing priorities with no specific timeline provided for reconsideration. The recommendation was filed with the review documentation. No new inspection mission was scheduled. 30 months after the mission, the automated monitoring systems continued detecting consistent conditions at Cordova-Nine. The thermal signature remained stable. The acoustic patterns persisted in seismic monitoring data. The ice above the structure continued showing evidence of thermal influence. The deep ocean sensors continued measuring elevated water temperature. Every monitoring system showed the same result. The installation was maintaining operation, the pattern unchanged for 2.5 years. No power source had been identified. No maintenance had been conducted. No personnel had approached the site since the original survey dive. The structure operated without intervention. The systems remained active without external support. The heat output continued without diminishing. All observations were documented in various research and monitoring databases. Climate researchers noted ice anomalies. Geological teams recorded thermal patterns. Acoustic monitoring detected mechanical signatures. Satellite systems measured thermal output. Ocean sensors logged temperature elevation. No single system connected the data. No analyst examined all sources together. Each observation existed in its own database serving its own research purpose. The installation remained beneath the ice. The status panels remained illuminated. The environmental controls maintained stable operation. The automated systems continued their cycles. 33 months after the dive, Roche received notification that his operational clearance was being updated as part of standard administrative procedure related to ongoing personnel management. Various site access authorizations were being modified across the command structure. Among the adjustments, his clearance for certain Arctic installation sites was changed from active to archived status. This included Cordova-Nine. The change was procedural and reflected that he no longer required regular access to those specific site records given current operational assignments. He acknowledged the clearance update through standard channels. The notification was filed with his personnel records. His access to the Cordova-Nine file remained available through archived document systems but was no longer listed among his active operational clearances. 3 years after the mission, installation Cordova-Nine remained operational beneath the polar Atlantic ice. The decommissioning records from 1987 remained unchanged in official archives. The installation documented as having all systems removed, all power infrastructure disconnected, all functional components stripped, the site classified as environmentally inert. The survey mission documentation from 3 years prior remained in long-term archives. The helmet camera footage showed illuminated status panels responding to proximity. The thermal imaging data confirmed continuous heat output. The measurements verified elevated water temperature around the structure. The observations documented active environmental control systems. No investigation had reconciled the contradiction. No assessment had been completed. No explanation had been provided. Multiple monitoring systems continued detecting signs of operation across separate, unconnected databases. Satellites measured thermal signatures. Ocean sensors recorded temperature anomalies. Seismic monitors detected acoustic patterns. Ice cores showed thermal influence. Research vessels logged sonar contacts. All data was archived. No system cross-referenced the information. No analyst examined the complete picture. The installation maintained operation. The systems remained active. The heat continued. The responses persisted. No power source existed in any documentation. No maintenance had occurred. No personnel had returned to the site. The structure operated alone beneath the ice. The restricted zone remained in effect. Research vessels avoided the area. No missions were scheduled. No investigations were planned. The site existed in databases with contradictory records. Official decommissioning documents stated one condition. Field observations documented another. No resolution had been attempted. The file was complete. The documentation was thorough. The evidence was preserved. No conclusion had been reached. Installation Cordova-Nine continued its operation. The ice above remained measurably thinner. The water around it remained warmer. The systems within remained active. It had been abandoned 38 years ago. It refused to stop.